behavioral approach, no? When we talk about behavioral approach, this is so much different from the previous approaches that we discussed, no? They don't dwell actually, no, in the study of your unconscious, your past experiences. They don't talk on the different traits, di ba? But behavioral approach is purely on what is objectively observed and what is manipulated. So we talk about the behavior itself. They don't care actually with the subjective experiences of the person. Okay? So it's more of what is observed, what we can be able to measure, what can be able to manipulate. In most of the approaches that you encounter in psychology, behavioral approach is purely scientific based. It's objectively being measured. Unlike when we talk about personality, when we talk about um, the different traits, when we talk about the unconscious thoughts, the desires, diba? The wishes, the instincts, no? It's somewhat more of subjective, okay? And it's so complicated and difficult to measure. Okay? Unlike for the behavior, when we talk about the overt behavior, okay? Kaya nga siya observable behaviors, di ba? When we discuss about introduction to psychology, what is psychology, it's actually defined as the scientific study of mental processes and behavior. And there are two types of behavior. We have the overt behavior and the covert behavior. And when we talk about overt behavior, these are observable behaviors, the one that you directly see, diba? Directly witness. When we talk about covert behavior, these are hidden behaviors. Okay, so in behavioral approach, they are what is observable, what is manipulated. Those are important factors that we consider. Okay, so we also talk about the learned responses, no, to a stimuli. For example, if there's a stimulus, there should be a response. Okay, even ignoring still a response. Kapag meron isang tao nagsitsit sa'yo, okay, or tinawag yung pangalan mo, your immediate response is you have to look for that person. Diba? That is a stimulus and response. Kapag kakain ka, limbawa, you just took your lunch, okay, hindi mo dahil sobrang gutom mo, nagmamadali kang kumain, hindi mo na chinek kung mainit ba yung pagkain mo, hindi. So ano nangyari? Bigla ka napaso, diba? So what is your response? It's either iluluwa mo siya or maghahanap ka ng tubig, etc. If you actually see food, okay, kapag meron kayo nakikita pagkain siguro in the TV or a TV commercial, no, on food, di ba, yung matatakam ka, that is actually a response. So with all those learned responses to a stimulus, so SR ang tawag nito, stimulus response. Another is also on the habit systems, no? Ano yung consistent na nakikita natin sa isang tao? So that is more on the behavioral approach. So that's what makes, no, behavioral approach different from the other approaches that we have discussed before. Okay? And one of those known theories in behavioral approach, syempre, doon tayo kay John D. Watson, okay, the father of behaviorism, explaining also when it comes to the role of stimulus response. But before that, actually, no, before John D. Watson, there is already a study on behaviorism, on the behavioral approach. We have that in the person of Ivan Pavlov, where he actually, no, conducted a study on the classical condition. So we will discuss more into that when we had to see the connection between the theory of Skinner and also on conditioning, extinction, shaping, etc. Okay, so before we go to the concepts of Skinner, let's check first on the life story of Frederick of B.F. Skinner. So most of books or references, they actually use B.F. as a short, no, as a short term for his name. Okay, on Skinner. So the complete name of Skinner is Burgos Frederick Skinner. Okay, and he was born on March 20, 1904 at Susquehanna, Pennsylvania. He is an American psychologist. He is a first child of William and Grace Mange Skinner. Okay, so kung nabasa na ninyo yung theory actually ni Skinner, no, he is not actually yung kanyang studies na directly into psychology. Okay? So, writer po siya. Okay? He is more into literature, he is more into language. So, it's just with his readings, no? With his readings, and also on his experience. That's why he had already an interest in the study of psychology. So, he read some of the works of Watson and Pavlov. That's why he became determined to be a behaviorist. No? He got accepted, no, with all these years na naging writer siya. Kaso nga lang, he didn't become successful when it comes to his first career, and that is into writing. So, he actually, no, enrolled in the graduate studies in Harvard. Okay? So, noong unang panahon, hindi naman yan yung stricto sila that what you have finished should be also in line with the graduate studies that you have. So, they are quite open, no, with the choices on what particular graduate studies that you want to enroll. Okay? So, kung makikita niyo actually yung buhay ni Skinner, no, he is different from the other theories. If Freud, Adler had to struggle to prove themselves, di ba? If Rogers, mga ganyan, si Horney, they have issues with their parents. No, si Skinner naman, iba din yung kanyang pinagdaanan. Iba yung naging kanyang life story. Okay? Dito mo na makikita that even at a mature age, even on that particular age, there are still other things that we fail to become successful. Diba? Kung hindi ba sa inyo siguro, why do you study? Diba? Siyempre, you want to have a good future. Okay? Si Skinner is really an embodiment of a normal individual who had struggled to look for what his desires, his career, okay? Kasi yun yung naging concern actually ni Skinner is he had so much issues when it comes to his career before he became known in the field of psychology, okay? Na hindi siya naging successful sa lahat ng bagay. So yung naging struggle niya and also his doubts to himself regarding his capabilities. So doon mo makikita na itong mga theories natin, itong mga psychologists natin, ay normal na mga individual. Kasi kung ano rin yung nararanasan natin ng mga struggles, di ba, with our life, with our choices in life, they also experience that. Okay? And from these experiences of Skinner actually, where he crafted his own identity in the field of psychology. Okay? Well, you never knew na siya pala ay magiging sikat, no? Or one major contributors in the field of psychology. Yeah. So in 1933, Harvard created the Society of Fellows. It's a program designed to promote creative thinking among young intellectually gifted men at the university. And one of those identified intellectually gifted men was Skinner. Okay, so he was selected as a junior fellow and spent the next 3 years doing more laboratory works. Okay, so even until now, there's even in the contemporary times in psychology or in the present time, there are still followers of behaviorism. Nagkaroon ng psych lab, mga ganyan. So in 1945, Skinner left Minnesota to become chair of psychology department of Indiana University. In 1945, while he was in a vacation, Skinner wrote Walden 2. It's actually a story of a utopian novel that portrayed a society in which problems were solved through behavioral engineering. So pinagsama niya yung kanyang knowledge and also with his skills in writing and also his knowledge in psychology. Although not published until 1948, the book provided its author with immediate therapy in the form of an emotional catharsis. So Skinner retired as a professor of psychology in 1974, but he continued as a professor emeritus and wrote several books on human behavior that helped him attain the status of America's best-known living psychologist. Diba? Yung kanyang struggle, late 40s, doon lang niya talaga nakita yung kanyang success when it comes to his professional life. Diba? And for us, diba, sabi nga ni Eric Erickson, at that particular age, nasa middle adulthood ka na. Diba? You try to assess, you try to evaluate when it comes to your career and to your family. Okay? So, yan yung naging struggle ni Skinner. So, he received an unprecedented citation for outstanding lifetime contribution to psychology. The only person to receive such an award in the history of APA. And during his career, Skinner received other honors and awards, including serving as William James Lecturer at Harvard, being granted the 1958 APA Distinguished Scientific Award, and winning the President's Medal of Science. Diba? Naging too late man ang kanyang success, but still, everything's worth it. So yun yung sinasabi sa inyo na you don't need to be in a hurry. No, you don't need to be in a hurry to look for success or to chase success. Diba? If you have that hard work, if you have that, if you have that mindset that you don't need to quit in every failures that you have, diba? Maging kagaya kayo ni Skinner. Okay, so who are the precursors of Skinner's scientific behaviorism? So before there was Skinner, these are the people that became his let's say naging model niya. Okay, when it comes to his concept in behavior analysis or in operant condition. So we have Edward Thorndike and also John B. Watson. So these are the first two individuals na naging inspiration ni Skinner when it comes to studies on behaviorism. So the first psychologist to study consequences of behavior was Edward L. Thorndike. And Thorndike, actually, major contribution Thorndike? Ewan ko lang kung na-discuss sa inyo to ng teacher ninyo in the study in ITP. Pero we used to have learning psychology kasi as a subject. Pero sa bagong curriculum kasi, tinanggal na ang learning psychology as a subject. I think that will be included in your cognitive psych. Okay? So ano naman ang major contribution ni Edward Thorndike? So Thorndike actually observed that learning takes place mostly because of the effects that follow a response, and he called this observation the law of effect. Diba? So whatever stimulus that has been given or nandyan or that has been shown, there's always be an elicited response. And then we have also Watson, okay, John B. Watson, the father of behaviorism, that argued that the goal of psychology is the prediction and how we can be able to control the behavior, and that goal could be best reached by limiting now psychology to an subjective study of habits that is formed through stimulus-response connection. Okay, so kapag nasa exam yan class na, halimbawa, you'll be taking the word. Kasi kasama din po kasi ang behavioral theories in the word examination. Pag stimulus-response, for sure yan, that would be on the behavioral approach. Ang problema mo na lang dyan, how each behaviorists differ when it comes to the use of or explaining the stimulus and response. So magkakaiba yan. We have Watson, we have Skinner, we have Thorndike, we have Pavlov, we even have Kafka, Kohler. So mas marami pa pong mga behaviorists in the field of psychology. Okay? So, yun po yung kanilang naging stepping stone ni Skinner when it comes to his theory. Okay. So, what are the differences now? What makes Skinner's theory different from the other personality theories, since we are talking about tiers of personality? Actually, not so much on the study of personality. I just don't know why they actually included Skinner as part of tiers of personality. Maybe because we consider different explanations, different approaches in explaining when it comes to personality. Diba? We have already the psychodynamic side in explaining what's personality. We have already, humanistic approach as in explaining in what is personality. We have also the humanistic approach or the trait approach in explaining personality. So ano naman ang concept ng behavioral approach when it comes to explanation of personality? Okay? So para sa kanya kasi, personality is more of the learned responses to a stimulus. So what makes it different? First, he made no reference to internal subjective states to account for behavior. Okay? So hindi po niya you go away with unconscious influences, okay? Defense mechanisms, wala siyang ganyan. Traits, and even on the different driving forces, like instincts, okay? That cannot be seen and therefore has no place on scientific psychology. So, hindi natin kayang i-measure, hindi natin kayang i-manipulate itong mga subjective states, which is also considered to be one of the criticisms on the theory of Skinner, diba? You cannot be able to ignore even those subjective states, di ba? At i-consider mo na lang ang mga objective and manipulated behaviors. So how about those other behaviors, di ba? Hindi naman kaya explain ng behaviorism. Okay? Pero sila Skinner kasi radical. Okay? They believe on a radical behaviorism that it's only the behaviors that are being considered. Okay? The second one that makes it different is his choice of experimental subject. If in other theories they use of patients with schizophrenia, with mental disorders, sa trained psychology they use naman mga matured normal individuals. Kay Skinner naman ay hindi po siya bias. Okay? Unbiased ang kanyang pag-select ng kanyang subject. That's why it's more of experimental subject. When you reach third year, okay, when you reach your third year, you will have a subject on experimental psychology. So you will learn more into this, particularly on the experimental subject, the experimental group and the control group. Okay? At ano yung kaibahan ng experimental research on other methods of research studies. Okay? And then the third one, okay, ito siguro yun naman yung isa sa merong commonality with other theories that he presented actually a therapeutic technique that's not just used in psychotherapy, but even in other areas like in school, clinical setting, and industrial setting, even in counseling. We use the technique of Skinner, particularly on behavior modification. If you want to teach children, if you want to correct a misdemeanor, a negative behavior, you could be able to use behavior modification in changing those negative behaviors to positive ones. Okay? When you have your counseling subjects, you will learn more when it comes to behavior modification. Okay? So let's continue with other concepts. So Skinner actually was known by his concept on reinforcement. And he used this concept on reinforcement as the basis now of behavior. Okay? Ano sinasabi ni Skinner when we talk about behavior? Ito class, pagdating kay Skinner kasi, ang lagi lang natin tatandaan is we talk on behavior, reinforcement, stimulus, response. Okay? So yun lang yung key concepts or key terms ninyo kapag gagamitin ninyo ang konsepto ni Skinner. Okay? So sabi ni Skinner, behavior can be controlled by its consequences. That is, by what follows the behavior. Okay? The role now of a stimulus and a response. Okay? For the past 3 meetings that I canceled the online class. That is actually an example of how behavior is being controlled by the consequences. On the first class that I told you that we will meet, diba? Kukunti lang ang nag-attend. So even I have waited for 30 minutes, kukunti lang. On the second time that I scheduled an online class, diba? Medyo nadagdagan naman, but there were still few. Okay? So maybe some of you nandiyan na, makakapag-cancel ulit si Ma'am. But we failed to reach the prescribed number of attendees. So I canceled. For the third time, dumami lang siya nung pahuli na. Okay, when I got mad already. Okay? So you see, your behavior is being controlled because of the consequences from the previous classes, from the previous situation. Kaya siya nagbabago. Ngayon, for our fourth time that I have scheduled and an online class, di ba? Pagkabukas ko pa lang ng aking Facebook account in our FB group, di ba? That there are already 77 participants in my Facebook Live. So see, you see the behavior that is being changed, nagkakaroon ng modification or changes because of that situation, di ba? Because of that stimulus na laging nagka-cancel si mga babes na klase ninyo, di ba? Ano ang mga nagiging response ninyo? So syempre, for the next time, I won't do it anymore. Natural. No, mga babes has the power to do that. Why? Because I am your teacher, di ba? You've got other choice but to attend my class. Okay? But every time that you do something that is negative, diba, of course, there's a particular reinforcement that we give. Okay, ayan. So pag-usapan natin more on reinforcement. Yung ginawa mo ni Ma'am Babes, reinforcement ba siya o punishment siya? Because there is a big difference, no? When we talk about reinforcement and punishment. Okay, ayan. So behavior can be controlled by its consequences. That is by what follows the behavior. So, isa pa pala sa naging pagkakaiba, okay, I forgot, this is the major difference, no, of Skinner's theory with other theories, is the use now of animals, okay? So, with the previous theories that we discussed, di ba, ang ginamit talaga nila as their subject, as their respondents, no, in their studies, were human beings. But for Skinner kasi, and this is common actually in among behaviorists, no, is the use now of animals, okay? Rats, dogs, even monkeys, pigeons, ayan, yan ang hilig kasi ni Skinner, using now rats and pigeons, di ba? Even doon sa kwento ng buhay ni Skinner, that he even taught pigeons, di ba, on they were being involved no during the World War I, di ba? Para mag-send ng message. In Hollywood movies, there were Hollywood movies that they used no pigeons as senders of messages, as a messenger, I should say, di ba? So ginagamit niya ang animal. So yun pala, yun din sa malaking pagkakaiba ni Skinner sa ibang theorists. Okay? Wait a minute. Walang plus, ah? Okay. May so far pala class. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions before we proceed? Meron po kayong mga questions. You have supplemental ideas that you have reached, that you have read, I should say, that you have reached, no, that you have read in the discussion. If you want to be shared in the group, meron po ba? You can just ask questions, no? Class. Questions, class. If you have, you just address your questions. You can just type your questions in the comment box. Okay, so far, si Bioni naman, siya naman nag-respond, sabi niya, wala naman. And even also with Kinboy. Okay, so let's continue our discussion with Skinner's theory. Okay, so Skinner actually use animals no, in his studies and also at the same time with human beings. No? Bakit animals ang ginamit niya? Because animals are very much receptive when it comes to responses. No? Lalong-lalo na when it comes to conditioning, mas madali kasi silang mag-elicit ng response as compared to human beings. Diba? At syempre, diba, they are more also into reflexes. Okay, ang mga animals. That's why he used animals as main respondents or subjects in his studies. Okay, so an animal or a human being could be trained to perform virtually any act, and that the type of reinforcement that's being followed, okay, the behavior would be responsible for determining it. So thus, whoever controls the reinforcement has the power to control human behavior. So ito yung sinasabi ko, since I am your teacher and I have the power to control, diba? For example, reinforcement, when to give reinforcement, may it be positive or negative reinforcement. So in this particular subject, so I have actually the control, diba, on what particular human behavior that you have to respond. Okay, so yun, that's the best example for this discussion on reinforcements. Okay, so this is also in a way that the experimenter can control the behavior of, for example, a lab rat or let's say dogs, mga ganyan. So in there, they actually have a laboratory, okay, experimental laboratory, where they actually put all their respondents or subjects. In experimental side pala class, we use the term subject. Okay, we use the term subject. Lalo na kapag mga experimental researches, we use the term subject. Okay, kapag descriptive research ang gagamitin ninyo, lalong-lalo na when you reach higher years in psychology, ang tawag po natin ay respondents. Okay, respondents. Even in clinical setting, if you have to evaluate a person in clinical setting, we call them as subjects. In counseling, we call them counselees. In other field is we call them clients. Okay? So you have also to be careful in what to call them. Okay, ano yung mga terms na gagamitin? So in experimental, subjects ang tawag po natin ito. Okay, subjects. Okay. So there are two kinds of behavior according to Skinner. Okay, so we have the respondent behavior and the operant behavior. Okay, respondent and operant behavior. So what's the difference between the two? So we take first what is respondent behavior. When we talk about respondent behavior, it is a response made to or elicited by a specific stimulus. Okay, so every responses is elicited by a specific stimulus. Okay, so a response made to or elicited by a specific stimulus. Ano yung mga examples ng mga respondent behavior natin? We have reflexive behavior. Okay, so these reflexive behaviors are unlearned. Okay, unlearned, they occur automatically and involuntary. Okay, tingnan ninyo kapag kapag nakaningan, okay, sa mata ninyo, or there is actually a light, a bright light, diba? Nakatitig ka. What happens? Ano yung reflex ninyo? It's you have to close your eyes, diba? That's actually called to be a reflex. Okay. Another is when you breathing reflex. Okay, it's supposed to be a reflex. Ibig sabihin nito, pag namanap pa lang natin, hindi na kailangan ituro sa inyo kung paano huminga. Okay, so these are involuntary. Okay, so these are automatic responses. Okay, ano pa ba yung mga other reflexive behaviors natin? Usually sa mga babies or infants, no, you usually see yung mga reflexes. Okay, pero kahit tayo naman, we have those reflexes. Blinking reflex. Okay, it's considered to be a reflex. It's also a response. Diba? Or kaya pag matching kayo, diba? You cannot be able to sneeze with your eyes open. It's always, when you sneeze, you close your eyes. Okay? So that is considered to be a reflexive behavior. So when we talk about reflexive behavior, since it's involuntary, it's actually, it's unlearned, okay? So there is no need to be trained to make the appropriate response, okay? Another is on conditioning. Okay, so aside from reflexive behavior, we also have what we call as conditioning. So conditioning is actually a higher level of respondent behavior that is being learned. Okay, so meron din po tayong mga respondent behavior that could be learned. Okay? So it actually involves now the substitution, okay, of one stimulus for another. Okay? So the concept actually originated from the idea of Ivan Pavlov, the known Russian psychologist, and later being adopted by John D. Watson, just like what I have explained earlier, as the basic research method for behaviorism. So si Ivan Pavlov made a study, let's call it as a classical conditioning, which he used now dogs, okay, in explaining what is classical conditioning. Okay, so dyan naging known si Pavlov, okay, on the classical conditioning. I just hope your teacher in the ITB explained, no, how it's being, conducted, or how does classical conditioning being used as a form of when we teach when it comes to behavior. Okay, so just a recap on that. Okay, he used those for particularly for eliciting now salivation. Okay, so before conditioning, so you have here this illustration that I presented. Okay, you have before conditioning, we have during conditioning, and after conditioning. And sabi ko nga kanina, di ba, earlier, that we look into the stimulus response. In every stimulus, there is a response. Okay, so before conditioning, so ito yung nakita ginawa ni Ivan Pavlov when it comes to his classical conditioning study. Di ba? So there's this dog. Okay, of course, it's being conducted in the laboratory. So there's the dog and the food. So so the food actually before conditioning, dahil wala pa namang nangyayari, so we're trying now to see if pwede ba natin i-train ang isang aso when it comes to salivating. Okay, so the food becomes the unconditioned stimulus, and here's the dog. Ano kaya ang kanyang unconditioned response? So every time that the scientists presented, or the team of Ivan Pavlov presented the food, which is considered to be unconditioned stimulus, the dog salivates. Okay? That's the response. Kaya tingnan niyo kapag nanonood kayo or nakakita kayo ng pagkain, nagsunog kainin, natatakam kayo, di ba? Yung salivate, lalong-lalo na kapag nakita kayo ng maasim, mga ganyan, masarap na pagkain, naamoy ninyo, masarap siya, di ba? So you actually salivates, and even your biological, di ba? Biological, parts of the body would also react. Diba? Parang yung gastric acid niyo tumataas siya, naglalaway, etc. Okay? So that could be an unconditioned response. Now, Ivan Pavlov says, what if I have to add, okay, additional or give additional stimulus? So what if instead of presenting the food to the dog, na nagsasalivate siya tuwing pinapakita yung pagkain, what about if I have to make a strange noise? Okay? So walang pagkain. Yung meron tayo, whistle. Na pwede mong gamitin in creating a strange noise. So naging neutral stimulus siya. Ano ang nakita, ano ang reaction ng aso? There's no response. Okay, there's no response. So during the conditioning part now, in the middle of the study, they try to incorporate this whistle. Ang ginamit niya na Ivan Pavlov, it's a bell. It's not a whistle, it's a bell. So they use now this bell plus the food. Okay, so pinagsasabay nila. So during that conditioned response, diba, paulit-ulit yan. So when they present food, there's a bell. There's a bell, there's conditioned food. Or there's the stimulus that's considered to be the food. What is the response of the dog? They salivate. The dog salivates. So paulit-ulit yun na ginagawa. Ngayon, titingnan natin if there's really a conditioning on the part of the dog. So after conditioning, tinanggal nila yung food, ang meron lang yung bell. What is the response of the dog? Nagsasalivate siya. So doon mo makikita that the dog actually di ba, has it in mind that every time na meron tong bell na to or there's a strange sound, merong pagkain. Okay, merong pagkain. So the same way also, how we are being conditioned as human beings. Di ba ma'am? So pareho lang tayo sa aso. Well, it's natural for us, di ba? It's natural for us when we are hungry, di ba? We have to look for food. Bakit? Kapag nagugutom ba kayo, ang ginagawa ninyo? Natutulog ba kayo? Nagtitiktok ba kayo kapag nagugutom kayo? No, it's not, di ba? The automatic response when we are hungry, we have to look for food. That is automatic. That is actually that they're being wired, no? We are being conditioned to do that. Okay? Pero yun nga, ginamit kasi nila ay mga animals. So yan po yung naging kay Pavlov. Okay? Ano ba? Kapag ikaw ay kinagat ng langgam, di ba? Or kinagat ka ng lamok, what's your immediate response? Di ba? You would say, ouch. O kaya, wow, social naman yung ma'am, aray, di ba? O kaya kamutin mo kaagad, di ba? Dahil masakit. So hindi ka naman siguro na kinagat ka ng langgam after 1 hour, after 2 hours, doon ka lang magre-react, di ba? There's something wrong with your brain, di ba? Kapag, yun nga, pag may sumitsit sa'yo, di ba? Someone actually na sumitsit sa'yo, hindi pa niya tinawag yung pangalan mo. Ano ang immediate response? Hindi mo alam kung sino tinawag niya. Bigla ka nang lilingon. That is a stimulus response. So we are being conditioned na kapag merong sumitsit, feeling natin tayo yung tinatawag. So conditioning po yun. Okay? Another, kapag ayaw mo yung, halimbawa, yung pagkain, masarap siya sa tingin. Tapos nung tinikman mo, hindi pala siya masarap. Ano yung reaction mo, di ba? When you don't like the food, what is your reaction? So, ano yung condition sa utak mo? So, that's considered to be a classical condition. Bakit siya classical conditioning? Ito, ang kwento kasi ni Ivan Pavlov, yung una daw, hindi daw siya pinapansin when it comes to his studies. It's only when John D. Watson adopted his study na naging known ang classical conditioning. Why is classical? Because this is the first experiment that is being conducted in the behavior approach. Okay, in behaviorism. Kaya siya classical. Kasi doon halos nagsimula until such time that other behaviorists adopted the study or the result of the study of Ivan Pavlov. Okay? So yan po ang kwento ni Ivan Pavlov. Okay? Even during the time of Adler, during the time of Freud, no, meron na po si Ivan Pavlov. Nag-aaral na po siya na behaviorism. Nagawa na po niya ang classical conditioning. Kaso nga lang, di ba, syempre, hindi yun yung known during that time. Okay? Hindi yun yung known during that time. Okay, so that is all about the classical conditioning. Well, hindi naman yan kasi yung main topic natin. So we go back with Skinner. Ayan. So aside from conditioning, we also have reinforcement. Okay? Pero itong conditioning na to, ito naging nag-umpisa ang lahat ng studies ni Skinner. Okay? So Pavlov's classical conditioning demonstrated now the importance of reinforcement. Okay? So ano nga ba ang reinforcement? So when we say reinforcement, it is the act of reinforcing a response that strengthens it and increases the likelihood that the response will be repeated. Okay? I repeat, reinforcement, it is the act of reinforcing a response, reinforcing a response strengthens it and increases the likelihood that the response will be repeated. Okay? So yun po si reinforcement. Halimbawa, there are two types actually of reinforcement. We have positive reinforcement and we have negative reinforcement. Okay? So ang reinforcement actually, it is not to strengthen the response of a particular stimulus and they need to repeat it. Kaya nga sinasabi ko, reinforcement is different from punishment. Negative reinforcement is different from punishment. Bakit? Si negative reinforcement, kahit sa tinatawag siya na negative, na hindi maganda, okay? It's actually an aversive, something that is threatening, but the end result is still positive. Okay? Or there is actually an increase that the behavior should be repeated. Okay? Ang punishment kasi, it decreases or it lets the human being not to repeat that particular behavior anymore. Okay, ulitin ko ha, si negative reinforcement, negative ang stimulus or there's aversive and aversive and also let's say a threatening, okay, stimulus, but the elicited response should still be positive and should be repeated. Si punishment naman, okay, it actually becomes threatening and an aversive, but it decreases, okay, yung positive response at hindi na siya inuulit. I give you an example of negative reinforcement. Ayaw mo na si positive reinforcement kasi alam naman natin yan eh. Bigyan mo yan ng rewards sa isang bata, bigyan mo siya ng candy para tumigil siya sa pag-iyak. It becomes a positive reinforcement, di ba? Every time that you get a perfect score, I will give you a particular reward, di ba? That's positive reinforcement. O kaya pag sinabi ng nanay mo, anak, kapag wala kang bagsak ngayong SEM na to, di ba? Bibigyan ka na ng bagong cellphone. It's a positive reinforcement. Usually, ang nagiging dilemma kasi natin is between negative reinforcement and attachment. Kaya yun yung gusto mong i-focus. Negative reinforcement, example of a negative reinforcement. Halimbawa na lang, no? You are in the online class. Madalas buong araw nyo nandiyan na kayo sa bahay niyo. There are times that you get lazy, di ba? Kahit lagi sinasabi ng nanay mo, maglinis ka nga ng kwarto mo, or ayusin mo mga gamit mo. But there are times that you don't follow them, di ba? Kaya nga, saglit, or mamaya, mga ganyan. And then here comes your mom, na paulit-ulit niya ng sinabi sa'yo, di ba? Na kailangan mo nang linisin yung kwarto mo. Pero hindi ka nakikinig, hindi mo pa rin ginagawa, busy ka mag-mobile legends, busy ka mag-TikTok, busy ka sa cellphone mo, etc. etc. And here comes, let's say, pang 5 beses na sinabi ng nanay mo, biglang nagalit yung nanay mo, kinuha niya yung cellphone mo, di ba? Sabi niya sa'yo, pag hindi mo pa rin nilinis tong kwarto mo, hindi ko ibabalik ang cellphone mo. Di ba? O kaya grounded ka sa paggamit ng cellphone. Is it punishment? It could be a punishment. Pero, ang response mo naman, doon natin siya titignan. Di ba? Gumalaw ka, bumangon ka ngayon, kinuha mo na yung walis, kahit masama yung loob mo, or ang dami-dami mong sinasabi behind the back of your mom, di ba? Or kaya magulang mo. So, pero, ang ginawa mo, nilinis mo pa rin yung kwarto mo, inayos mo pa din siya, di ba? Negative, yung reinforcer na binigay, pero still, ang outcome niya ay positive. That is negative reinforcement. Another, di ba ewan ko lang ha, if you've been traveling, pero before the pandemic kasi, pag nagbabiyahe, kapag sumasakay kayo sa Victory Bus, di ba sa Victory ba yun? Or Florida? I just don't know, parang Victory ata yun eh. Yung merong alarm na hanggang Florida bus. Na basta kapag na-exceed na nila yung prescribed speed, di ba, biglang nag-a-alarm. Di ba? There is a beeping sound doon sa bus. So that is considered to be a negative reinforcement kasi nga nakakairita ang beeping sound na ito pag paulit-ulit. So anong gagawin ng driver? Babagalan niya. Okay? So kung ano yung range dapat lang ng prescribed speed, hanggang doon lang siya. Parang hindi mag-beep yung sound. Or hindi magkakaroon ng beeping sound, I should say. Mag-beep yung sound. There will not be a beeping sound. So that becomes a negative reinforcement. Ano naman ang punishment, ma'am? Siyempre, kapag pinagalitan ka, pinalo ka na, ayan, uulitin mo pa ba? Siyempre, hindi na. Okay? Sinigawan ka na ng nanay mo, kinurot ka na niya, di ba? And that is considered to be a punishment. Okay? So, yung hindi ka lumabas ng bahay, okay? Hindi ka talaga hindi ka na natuloy na yung mga kaibigan mo tapos ikaw hindi. So, that becomes a punishment. Pag hindi mo na uulitin yung behavior na yun, it's become a punishment. That is punishment because of punishment. Si negative reinforcement, hindi ka maganda yung reinforcer na binigay, pero at least positive yung response. Okay? So, do you have questions with that? May katanungan pa ito. Questions on that class? May katanungan kayo when it comes to positive and negative reinforcement? Kagatin din yung langgam. Ewan ko na lang kung kagatin nyo rin yung langgam. Okay? So that is on the reinforcement. And of course, no, there's also what we call as extinction. Diba? Kapag paulit-ulit naman, hindi naman siya 3%. Kagaya nung nangyari dito sa aso. Diba? Na paulit-ulit na lang, there's the bell, the sound of the bell, pero wala namang pagkain. So every time na mayroong bell, wala namang pagkain. Until such time na hindi na rin siya nagbibigay ng response. Kasi nga, it's already, extinct na siya. Okay? There's already the process of extinction. Okay? So when we talk about extinction, it is the process of eliminating a behavior by withholding a reinforcement. So yung bawa na lang, sasabihin ng mama mo, anak, kapag naka-perfect ka, tuwing naka-perfect ka ng exam, bibigyan kita ng, let's say, dadala ko bawat-bawat mo. Natin, dadala ko 100 pesos. Diba? Lagi ka na lang naka-perfect ng exam. Lagi nakakalimut, hindi ka naman nabibigyan ng nanay mo. Diba? Sabi niya, naka-perfect ako ngayon. Lagi ka na naka-perfect. Diba? Maubos ang pera niya. Mga ganyan. So, pag naka-perfect, diba? Hindi naman na pala ako binibigyan ng rewards. Okay, so, pwede rin naman natin is either nawawala niyo yung ganung klase ng motivation, nawawala niyo yung ganung klase ng ng momentum ng isang bata. So, that is actually a form of extinction. Okay? Ayan. Extinction siya. Ewan ko na lang don't tell me class, sa edad yung yan, di ba? Ganun pa man din ang pag-motivate ng parents ninyo, ha? Pag binigyan kayo pera, binigyan kayo pagkain, just ko, yan lang po ay ginagawa sa mga bata. Okay, sa mga bata. For sure, sa inyo sa college, di ba? Ewan ko na lang kung paano ang reinforcement ng parents. Diba? Okay? Ayan. So the next type of behavior is the operant behavior. So ito talaga yung naging major study or focus ni Skinner. It's on operant behavior. Okay, so anong ibig sabihin ng operant behavior? It actually, it involves or a behavior is emitted spontaneously or voluntarily that operates on the environment to change it. Okay, so it involves acting in a way that appears to be voluntary rather than reacting involuntary to stimulus to which we had been conditioned. Okay, so the nature or frequency of operant behavior will be determined by, or modified by the reinforcement that follows the behavior. Okay, so ito, doon pa rin naman tayo sa positive and negative reinforcement. Okay, so in the operant behavior, it was actually explained by Skinner's box. So tapos na tayo doon sa classical conditioning ni Pavlov. Ngayon, pupunta ngayon tayo sa study talaga ni Skinner. And he calls this as the Skinner's box or the Skinner's apparatus box. Okay? So kung kay Pavlov, aso ang ginamit niya, kay Skinner naman, he made use of rats. Okay? He made use of rats. So D.F. Skinner now, okay, conducted now this type of a study. So he placed a hungry rat, okay, a hungry rat inside the box. Okay, yung tinatawag yung Skinner's box. Okay, ngayon, doon sa Skinner's box niya, ay meron po siyang lever where if you press this one, may lalabas na food. Okay? So, meron din po yung sa signal lights, mga ganyan. So, meron po talagang sinet up niya. Okay, sinet up ni Skinner yung kanyang apparatus box in that way. Okay? So, every time, just to make it short, doon sa kanyang Skinner's box experiment, is that the hungry rat, diba? If you're being placed, the rat is being placed in a box, diba? Ano ang immediate reaction or immediate response ng rat? Siyempre, they have to discover, they have keep on walking, siguro, tignan nila yung kanilang paligid. Of course, this is a rat, so you cannot be able to expect a rat that they could be able to think, ano ba yung gagawin ko rito? Of course, they are not irrational beings like us, diba? So, the rats actually keep on moving, keep on, walking, running in that box. Until such time na, he pressed the lever. So, may lumabas sa pagkain. Diba? So for this particular rat, malay ko ba kung ipe-press ko ito, may lalabas sa pagkain. So that could be an accident. Okay? It could be just a coincidence na meron ako na-impress doon. Wala, meron pa lumabas sa pagkain. Okay? So, ngayon ulit, kung busog na siya, he would stop. Okay? Now, when he becomes hungry, ganun ulit. Ikot siya na ikot sa box niya. And then, he can to press the lever. May lumabas ulit na pagkain. Kapag paulit-ulit na ginagawa niya yan, diba? The rat will be conditioned, kapag pinipress ko tong lever na to, may lalabas sa pagkain. Diba? May lalabas sa pagkain. So that becomes a passive reinforcement. Diba? Kaya nga tayo, kapag sabihin natin, magandang behavior to, binibigyan ako ng reinforcement, binibigyan ako ng reward. Okay? So I keep on repeating this one. If I will be behaving, diba, ang nanay ko siguro bibigyan nila ako ng reward. Pag mag-aaral ako ng mabuti, there will be expected reward. Diba? Siyempre, pag hindi naging magandang behavior mo, hindi ka nila bibigyan ng reward. It becomes also negative reinforcement. Ngayon, Skinner conducted a second study. Now, wala naman na siyang pagkain. Okay? Ay, meron man yung pagkain, but there is an option actually on using it. So kapag nagkakamali yung rat, halimbawa na napindot na lever, instead of food, ang lalabas, electric shock naman yun. Okay? So there is an electric shock. So the electric shock was introduced to the rat. So every time that he made a wrong button, electric shock. Okay, so anong nangyayari? Hindi niya na siya uulitin or kaya iniiwasan niya na i-press yung button na yun. Okay? So if it feels threatening to you, if it doesn't good to you, di ba? Kailangan mo ba siyang balik-balikan? Natural hindi na. Kaya nga, pero minsan, mas mabuti pa ang hayop kaysa na mag-isip kaysa sa tao, di ba? Kapag it's not, they feel that this kind of discomfort, di ba? Yung alam na nila that they are in danger, it doesn't feel good, they avoid it. Pero ang mga tao, di ba? Meron yung kahit sinasaktan na, you are in a toxic relationship, you still stay in that relationship. Di ba? So, bakit kaya ganun? Okay? Kaya nga mas magandang aralin para kay Skinner, mas magandang pang-aralin ng hayop kaysa sa tao. Di ba? Kahit hindi ka na, di ba? You are not comfortable anymore, di ba? Staying in that unhealthy relationship, you can still on staying. Di ba? Tignan mo yung rat, di ba? Na kapag mali yung button na pinipindot niya, nakaka-receive siya ng electric shock. Tapos hindi niya na uulitin. Pero tayo, di ba? Mga tao, well, I don't exclude myself, even me, di ba? Every time that even though I have choices in life, alam ko hindi naman na maganda ang kahihinatnan, di ba? But you still keep on doing it, di ba? So, kailangan talaga ng behavior modification among human beings, di ba? So, doon ko ba mas masasabi na mas mas magaling ang hayop when it comes to the stimulus response kaysa sa tao to think that human beings are irrational, di ba? Mamaya, tignan natin yung mga different methods on how we do behavior modification. Okay? Pero nasa rats kasi tayo. Paano na lang kaya kapag kayo ilagay sa box na to, no? Ulit-ulitin nyo kaya yung, ano kaya pipindutin yung button? Right? Yun lang naman yung realization ko doon sa study ni Skinner. Okay. Ayan. So, when it comes to reinforcement, sabi ni Skinner, if you keep on giving positive reinforcement to the child or to a person, di ba, ang tendency is yun na lang yung maaalala niya. Paano na lang yung application part niya? Paano pag wala siyang matanggap na reinforcement? Di ba? Does this person still emit the same response even without the reinforcers? So, meron mga ganun. So, paano natin babaguhin ngayon yung ganung klase ng behavior? So, sabi ni Ms. Skinner, so that people will not take advantage so much on reinforcement, okay, on reinforcer. So, sabi niya, let's have the schedule of reinforcement. This schedule of reinforcement speaks actually on when to give, or it determines when to give reinforcement. Okay? So ano itong reinforcement schedules? It's actually patterns or rates of providing or withholding reinforcers. Okay? So this schedule of reinforcement or reinforcement schedules are used to determine their effectiveness in controlling the behavior. Hindi naman pwede na tuwing gagawa ka ng magandang behavior, ay meron kang reinforcement. Di ba? Baka hanggang doon na lang siya. Paano pag hindi siya nabigyan ng reinforcement? Or there's no such thing as a reinforcer? Does this person have the same response or not? Okay? So yan. So there are 4 types of schedules of reinforcement. Okay? So we have the fixed ratio schedule, we have the variable ratio schedules, fixed interval schedules, and the variable interval schedules. Okay. So when we talk about fixed ratio schedule, okay, so there is after a specific number of responses, the response is reinforced. So for example, a rat only gets food pellets after pressing the lever every 3 times. So bakit siya fixed? Kasi nga every 3 times. So every 3 times na i-press niya yung button or yung lever, may lalabas na pagkain. Okay? So syempre, pag isa lang, wala siyang makukuha doon. So you have to press it 3 times. Fixed ratio na yan. So every third time na i-press ang isang lever, meron po siyang makukuhang makukuhang reward, and that's the food. For variable ratio naman, the reinforcement occurs after an unpredictable number of responses. Kaya nga siya, variable, it varies. Okay, it varies. For example, a rat presses the lever several times, but a pellet food administered at random and it's not based on any sort of fixed schedule. Halimbawa na lang, gawin mo siyang every third, every fifth, every 10th, diba? Pero meron pa rin siyang ratio. Okay? Hindi nga lang siya fixed. Okay? So, ayan. Si fixed interval schedule naman, a response is rewarded after an allotted period of time. Okay. So iba naman itong si ratio. Si ratio kasi, there is actually that kind of order. Okay, rank. Si interval, wala po. So a response is rewarded after an allotted period of time. So for example, if a rat presses the lever within the time frame of 30 seconds, it will be given 1 food pellet. So it does not matter how many times the rat presses the lever because only 1 pellet will be given during that time frame. So every after 30 seconds lang naman siya. So hindi naman siya sinasabi na, so within that 30 seconds, every third, every fifth, every 10th. So hindi naman po yun. Variable interval schedules naman, reinforcement occurs after an unpredictable amount of time. So for example, the rat may be rewarded a pellet every 15 seconds, and then every second, and then every 4th second. So it varies ang interval niya. So hindi mo alam. So when it comes to how about 2 people, ma'am, how we're being rewarded, di ba? On the fixed ratio. Si fixed ratio kasi, limbawa, kapag sasahod ng isang tao, madalas 15 and 30, di ba? Ini-expect mo na yan. Kahit hindi ka pumasok, kung regular employee ka, di ba? Permanente kasi isang trabaho. Pumasok ka man o hindi, na-late ka man o hindi, meron kang ini-expect na sahod mo every 15th and the 30th. So that is considered to be a fixed ratio. Okay? 15, 30. Okay? O kaya sasabihin mo, bonus. Kailan ba madalas binibigay ang bonus? Usually, when it comes to government employees, ang 13th month pay and the 14th month pay are given months of November and May. Diba? Ang mid-year is May. O yan, May na. Kailan madalas ito? It's on or after. Okay? Basta wag lang before May 15. Okay? Not before May 15. So, meron po siyang fixed na schedule yan. So, when it comes to variable ratio naman, hindi natin alam. Halimbawa na lang, let's say, ang allowances. Hindi natin alam kung kailan darating ang allowance. Okay? So, even on fixed interval. Si variable interval, ang best example niyan, kapag yung, fixed interval when it comes to gambling. Okay? If you're in a casino, sabi nila, swertehan lang ito. It's not swertehan. When you have watched the movie 21, ewan ko lang napanood nyo to, it's a Hollywood film. I think that was 2008, mga ganun, 2006, yata nilabas yung movie na yun. That how do some gamblers, or how does gamblers be able to win? Swertehan nga lang ba siya? Or there is actually a formula on when to win. Diba? In that movie kasi, they actually presented paano nananalo ang mga gamblers na to. Okay? Hinuhulaan ba nila yung lumalabas? No, it's not. They actually have a pattern. I also asked some of my friends who are math majors, lalo-lalo na doon sa statistics, when you know about probability, diba? Is they use that concept of probability in winning. Maybe there's a chance of luck also, there's a factor of luck, being lucky, pero actually ginagamit din nila as a form of computation. Okay? So akala ko variable interval ang gambling, hindi pala. So meron po siyang certain secrets when it comes to gambling. Lalong-lalo na kapag yung card games, ayan, siguro a little chance of winning, but there's actually a pattern of that. Okay? So fixed interval. Okay, so that is on the schedules of reinforcement. Itong mga reinforcement is not only used in animals, even on human beings. Okay, human beings. So, halimbawa na lang sa akin, di ba? During face-to-face, ayan, lalong-lalo na kapag may mga quizzes, mga major term tests, I give rewards to my students. No? Every time sino ang highest, mga ganyan. Another is pop-up quiz. Siguro pag magkita-kita tayo by next school year, kasi narinig ko na face-to-face na by next school year, ayan, I'm teaching higher, major subjects in psychology, kita pa rin po tayo. Diba, maranasan nyo na yung pop-up quiz ni Ma'am Gail. So every meeting yan, meron po akong pop-up quiz. So that's actually a fixed, okay? It's fixed schedule na yan. Pero kung saan topics, it varies. So it becomes variable interval. Okay? So yan. Pwede nyo gamitin din yan schedules of reinforcements. Okay. Aside from the schedules of reinforcements, Skinner also introduced the term successive approximation. Okay? Ano tong successive approximation? It's actually a method of shaping the operant behavior by reinforcing responses similar to the desired behavior. Okay? So initially, the responses roughly approximating the desired behavior are reinforced. But later on, diba, only responses closely approximating the desired behavior are reinforced. For example, on the case of that rat, that's being put in Skinner's box, is that the rat's behavior was shaped to get it to the press the lever. Okay? In this example, each time the rat is rewarded, it's being rewarded for a successive approximation or for acting in a way that gets closer and closer to the desired behavior. Siguro doon sa part ng rat na yun, diba? Trial and error. If you keep on trying, diba, to produce or to press the lever, para sa kanya may lalabas. Siguro is also a chance, na or a wild guess for that rat, diba? Bakit niya tuwing pinipress ko itong lever na ito, hindi lumalabas sa pagkain? Okay? So it becomes a successive approximation that becomes closer, diba? So ulit-ulitin ko lang itong i-press tong lever na ito, pinalabas sa pagkain. Okay? So that's the time also, diba? Bakit kaya siya, bakit nagiging mabait itong mamak sa akin? Bakit nagiging mabait itong tawag ko sa akin? Diba? It's because maybe, diba, kahit hindi niya sabihin sa'yo kung ano yung gusto niya or ano yung gusto niyang behavior mo dapat, nakikita mo na mabait siya kapag itong ginagawa ko. So I have to keep on doing this. Nakasimangot siya kapag ginagawa ko to or nagagalit siya kapag ginagawa ko to. So hindi mo na ito gagawin. Okay? So successive approximation. So regardless kung sasabihin man sa'yo yan na dapat mong gawin or hindi mo siya gawin, pero doon mo marirealize sa sarili mo, ma-realize mo, kailangan ito yung hindi ko gawin, ito yung dapat ito. Successive approximation. Okay? Ang problema nga lang kasi sa theory, sa concept ni Skinner, if you have intellectual disability, ayan, first, let's say, mababa ang IQ mo, you cannot be able to have a behavior modification. Okay? You cannot be able to have a behavior modification. Bakit? Siyempre, i-analyze mo siya eh. Diba? Hindi mo naman i-explain, ito yung binibigyan ka na lang. Pero ginagamit nila ito. Lalong-lalo na for kids who have intellectual deficiency. But for adults, it's very difficult to employ behavior modification. Okay? It's very difficult to have behavior modification. Bakit? Kasi lahat binibigyan natin ng excuse or explanation ng bawat behavior natin. Okay? Binibigyan yan. So, mahirap magkaroon ng behavior modification. Kasi sinasabi nila, matigas ang ulo ng isang matanda. Okay? Siyempre, kasabihin sa'yo. Alam naman, doon ang tayo nadadala sa mga binibigay ng parents natin. That's why, hindi na. Sasabihin mo, pag linisin ka siguro ng nanay at tatay mo ngayon, ewan ko na lang. Diba? You make a lot of excuses. You think of a lot of reasons just to avoid being reprimanded by your parents. Another is superstitious behavior. Okay? The superstitious behavior is the behavior that results from accidental reinforcement of an action so that the organism continues to repeat it. So mali ba? Di ba mali nga ba nung daga, na kapag press mo pala ito, may lalabas sa pagkain. So it could be na, hindi ko sinasadya ito. Kailangan ko pala siyang i-press. So kaya kahit when it comes to food, di ba? Di mo maalam kung masarap ba ito o hindi. Hanggang sa time na nalaman, masarap pala siya. Okay? So superstitious behavior. And the last one is we have the self-control of behavior. It is the ability to exert control over the variables that determine our behavior. Okay? And there are different techniques or methods when we use self-control of behavior. So meron po tayong stimulus avoidance, self-administered cessation, aversive stimulation technique, and the self-reinforcement. Okay? So ano tong stimulus avoidance? For the word itself, you avoid the stimulus. Okay? So it's removing yourself from an external variable, okay, that affects your behavior. For example, you're in a room or you're sharing your room with a sibling or with a roommate, diba? O nag-boarding kayo, na hindi mo naman siya ganong kakilala. And you get annoyed with how noisy is this person, diba? O kaya masyadong malakas yung music niya or masyadong malakas yung boses niya kapag nakipagkwentuhan siya or may kausap siya sa phone. And you are actually studying, so you are being disturbed. So anong gagawin mo? Instead actually of, having a reactive response towards that roommate or towards that sibling, diba? Alis ka na lang, diba? You look for another place where you can be able to study. That is stimulus avoidance, okay? Or it could be also avoiding a person or a situation that makes you angry. It's not because duwag ka or it's just that ayaw mo lang talaga siyang ma-stress. Ayaw mo ma-stress, that's why you have to ignore people or you have to ignore situation, okay? It becomes a sensitive issue right now, lalong-lalo na pagdating sa katatapos na election, diba? Some people would usually, I read comments, I read postings in Facebook regarding paano nanalo ang tandem ng Marcos at saka ng Duterte, diba? They're even in other side, both parties have this kinds of exchange of derogatory statements to each other. But there are still some people who would just read, but they don't comment, okay? So it could be a stimulus avoidance kasi nga, it becomes so toxic for other people, diba? It's not becoming an enabler. Actually, class, it's my first time to understand the word enabler, diba? Ngayon ko lang siya nalaman. A friend of mine explained it to me. So, pero kasi yung sinasabi nila na you're enabler, etc., mga ganyan. It's not an enabler. Ewan ko lang maybe it's more of a stimulus avoidance. Diba? Instead of getting stressed, instead of being toxic to this kind of situation, or you keep on seeing this person, diba? You just have to avoid it. Diba? Avoid the person. Ayan. Stimulus avoidance. Hindi dahil wala tayong pakialam ang isang tao, pero it's just that I just don't want to shake maybe, or there's something to do with stress, mga ganyan. Or ang dahil ko bang iniisip ng maraming importanteng bagay. Yan. So pero kung wala ka magawa, diba? O di join the pack. Diba? So bahala ka mga saang tribe ka where you belong. Okay? Ayan. The second one naman is the self-administered cessation. So si self-administered cessation, okay, we exert control to cure ourselves of bad habits, no, by overdoing the behavior. For example, you want to quit smoking. Ayan. Ulit-ulit mo siyang amuyin hanggang sa maumay ka na sa amoy. Or even sa pagkain, yung gusto mong mag-diet, di ba? So, yung mga favorite food mo, di ba? Ulit-ulitin mo siyang kainin until such time na nauumay ka na sa pagkain. So, self-administered sensation ang tawag doon. The third one is aversive stimulation technique. Okay? It involves unpleasant or repugnant consequences. So, these people would want to lose weight, declare the intention to their friends. Diba meron yung, na friend, sis, gusto ko mag-diet. So, lagi mong sinasabi, kapag hindi ko ginagawa yung pag-diet, kailangan mo ko sabihan na pagalitan mo ko. Ganyan. O kaya, every time that I would tell bad words, diba, or something that's not good, sabihan mo ko, paluin mo ko, or kaya kurutin mo ko. Okay, so that is an aversive stimulation technique. Okay, and the last one is we have the self-reinforcement. Not the word self. It is that we reward ourselves for displaying good or desirable behaviors. For example, at least the end of second semester, or for the whole year of your second year, never kang nag-absent kahit online class siya. Never kang na-delay mag-submit ng coursework, ng assessment, di ba? You have to reward yourself. Everything that you have done so much, that it exerted so much of your effort, you have to reward yourself. Okay? So yan yung example ng self-reinforcement. So these are the different techniques, no, where we can be able to have self-control on our behavior. Okay? Kaya nga, class, the only things that you can control is how you respond to situations. What are the things that you cannot control? Of course, how people respond to situations. You cannot be able to control what other people is thinking about you or even on things. What you can control is how you think about the situation, on how you think or how you would react to people. Okay? So yun po yung pwede natin siyang control. So, just to avoid na kailangan nating i-demand, i-control sa ibang tao nito, yung gusto natin. No, it's not. We cannot do that. Okay? It's actually beyond our control. Okay? The only thing that you can control is your behavior, your thoughts, and your emotions. Yun lang po ang kaya nyo control. But controlling other people's behavior, thoughts, and feelings, it cannot be. Okay? Hindi po kayang gawin yun. Unless na robot siya, di ba? Pwede mo lang siya i-program. Pero hindi naman robot ang mga tao eh. Okay? They are not robots. So yan. So we should know what are the things that we can control and what we cannot control para hindi rin po tayo nagkakaroon ng problema at madagdagan ang stress. Diba? Dagdag overthinking lang yan, tas. So there's still other, you go back, no? You go back to your goals. You go back on the things that you need, that needs focus. Okay? Ayan. So how would you be able to apply operant conditioning? So there are different scenarios or situations where we can use operant conditioning. So we have behavior modification. So yan yung sinasabi ko sa inyo na behavior modification is a form of therapy. We use that as a form of therapy, no? Usually for children. Okay? A form of therapy that applies the principles of reinforcement to bring about desired behavioral changes. Mas madali kasi itong gamitin. Kasi children are very particular even when it comes to external rewards. Diba? Parang when you become an adult, diba? External rewards, money, food, things, siguro nakaka-motivate pa din siya, but not that much anymore. Diba? Anong mas binibigyan natin ng weight, no, when it comes to reinforcement? Appreciation, recognition from people, diba? Validation of your feelings. Diba? So it's still a form of behavior modification, pero on what type, diba, of reinforcement being employed is also different when it comes to ages. And also, kung ano yung need mo. Okay? So, kung ano yung need mo. Marami ka ng pera, mayaman ka kayo, diba? Kailangan mo pa ba ma-reinforce because money will be used as your reinforcer? Of course not, diba? Ano naman kailangan mo? It's a affirmation towards other people, diba? Establishing good relationship with people, with your friends, diba? With your loved ones. So that would be on behavior modification. We also have this token economy. Okay, token economy was being used for behavior modification therapy, wherein tokens could be exchanged, no, for valued objects or privileges are awarded for desirable behaviors. Best example for this is that in other countries, actually, no, they use this as a form of behavior modification on people to stop littering. Okay, yung pagkalat ng mga plastic bottles. In other countries, I just don't know in Manila if they have this. Yung plastic bottles, diba, pwede mo siyang ipalit into monetary. Diba? And this money, pwede mo na rin siyang gamitin para doon sa pamasahe mo. Mga ganun. I think in UK ata yun, ayaw ko in Scotland ata yun. Kasi a country in Europe where they use this one na, na they would collect plastic bottles, okay? And then they would exchange that in the train station. So kung ilang plastic bottles ang kaya mong ibigay, as that there will be a certain amount na babalik sa'yo. And then you can use that. It is also being used here in the Philippines. Ewan ko kung sapat ata yun. Sa parte ng NCR, sa parte sa Manila. Dahil nga problema ang, daga. Diba? Kasagsagan ata ng baha noon. Ang daming mga daga. So there was this one community, I just don't know the place, the exact place, is that every time na meron kang dadalhin na daga, ganyan, patay na daga, syempre, meron siya kapalit na bigas, mga ganun. Na-news yun eh. Another yung portion ng Itbulaga, na yung, I just don't know kung ano yung kwan nila, yung laro nila na part of Itbulaga, wherein there will be a lot of people, there will be a certain barangay or community, and then tatakbuhan sila, they have to bring something, diba? Madalas ang pinapadala sa kanila yung mga plastic bottles eh, diba? Tapos meron siyang kapalit, tapos in the form of plastic bottles, meron makukuhaan, mga ganyan. So that is actually an example of a token economy, diba? Nakatulong ka na sa environment, at the same time, yung you change also the mindset of people na, ay, itong basura na to, ay, meron palang pwedeng pagkakitaan to. So, we can be able to give value. Kasi nga, we can get something in return. Okay? So, that is an example of an economy. Okay? So, how did Skinner view human nature when it comes to free will versus determinism? He is high in determinism. Between nature and nurture, mas mataas po siya sa nurture. Between past experience and present experience, causality and theologically, in between lang po siya. And then between uniqueness versus universality, is more into uniqueness. And when it comes to equilibrium versus growth, in between lang po siya. And then optimism versus pessimism, mas mataas siya sa optimism. Okay? So that ends my presentation, my discussion on D.F. Skinner's behavioral analysis. Do you have any questions? Questions so far? Class? Questions po. Yeah, oo, one for all for one. Yun nga pala, oo. So negative response po sa end result ko malaman na ito ay negative reinforcement. So punishment is more giving punishment kasi wala pang effect yung reinforcement. Usually kasi, like when we talk about reinforcement and punishment kasi, si reinforcement, alam mo na to, na kahit hindi siya maganda, but there is actually an outcome. You could be able to know already na ito yung gusto kong outcome na lalabas. Di ba? Sa inyo, if you have strict parents, di ba? Ayaw kang palabasin ng parents mo, ayaw kang papunta sa mga artists, etc. Di ba? It could be yung ayaw kang payagan to be a punishment. Pero in real sense, no, is it becomes a reinforcement. Maybe there are other things that you need to focus at home, in your studies. Nakikita na hindi ka parang epektado yung pag-aaral mo sa behavior mo. Could be. No? Si punishment kasi, alam mo sa umpisa, huwag mo na siyang ulitin. Meron tayong mga corporal punishments. Diba? Meron din tayong mga physical, diba? Yung paluin ka, kurutin ka, sigawan ka, o kaya you have to face the wall. Diba? It's a form of, well, these are actually forms of discipline. Diba? Pero si punishment talaga, alam mo nang hindi maganda yung galing mo, kaya, or hindi maganda yung galing, hindi maganda yung behavior mo, kaya hindi mo na siya uulitin. Okay? Kahit, alam mo may kasalanan ka. Okay? Si negative reinforcement, siguro, meron naman, pero hindi mo na gano'n na-realize. Okay? Ang behavior modification kasi, not exactly that you have to wait pa eh. You have to wait for what is the outcome. Okay? Ayan, sabi ni Yoli na apolitical. Hindi, it's not being apolitical. Yun nga sabi ko nga, it's a stimulus avoidance. Diba? Kaya nga, avoidance or ignoring is also a response. Diba? Hindi dahil wala kang pakialam. Siguro may pakialam ka, pero there are other things that is more important. Diba? Or you just don't like confrontations. Diba? There are people who are like that. They don't like confrontations. Or kaya they don't like to, may mga ganun kasi ng tao. Diba? Pero it's unfair on their part if you tell that naman. Diba? If you don't know them, if you don't know where they're coming from. Diba? Okay. So that ends. So by next meeting, since tapos mo na kayo nag-quiz nito, by next meeting, have Bandura, okay? And then Bandura, Kelly, Proctor, and Michelle, and then Filipino psychology. Ito pala class, I will be giving you your final requirement, but you can start actually doing your requirement this time, pag may mga time hindi ko kayo mamit. Okay? Your requirement in my subject is, among all those theories that we have discussed, from TOP1, from Theories of Personality 1, up to the present, I want you to choose one theory, group to has a group requirement. I want you to choose one theory where you can, where you would like to make an analysis. I will be posting the format on how you go about with your analysis. Okay? Hindi ko kasi pabuksan ang lens ngayon dahil under maintenance siya. Hindi ko alam kung bakit. Doon ko sana ipopost yung inyong format. Pero pag-usapan na ninyo among your groups, to choose a particular theory. Sa lahat, isang theory lang na gagawan nyo siya ng theoretical analysis. Okay? O wag po yung paano pag dalawa, isa lang. Pag-usapan ninyo kung anong theory ang gusto nyo gawan ng theoretical analysis. I will be posting the format later in the FB group. Okay? I-present nyo to sa klase. You will be presenting your, you will be presenting your output in the class. Okay? So, since wala namang question, thank you for attending our class for today. Good number, pero yung iba wala pa din. Okay? I hope the class leaders will be able to inform them and they will attend the discussion by the next class. Okay? So, stay safe, stay healthy class. Thank you for attending. See you on Monday. Okay, bye.